Welcome back to another high-level match of StarCraft 2. Now what I've got for you today is a best-of-5 series of top-level Zerg versus Terran, where in game number 1 we find ourselves on Greystone. Spawning right here in the top left-hand corner, playing with the red Zerg drones. From Finland we have Serral and his opponent. In the opposite corner from South Korea with the blue Terran SCVs, he goes by the name of ByuN. Serral versus ByuN in a best-of-5 series. If you're a fan of the Terran versus Zerg matchup, it really doesn't get much better than these two. So, ByuN, of course, very well known for his hyper-aggressive Terran playstyle with a hint of macro as well, right? Especially on this particular map, we've seen ByuN go for quite a few games where he decides to play that mass command center style that both Maru as well as Oliveira seem to be quite fond of. But in general, I think it's safe to say that at this level of play, ByuN is the most aggressive Terran player on the planet. Now I say that as he goes for a scoutless command center first. Okay, absolute classic. Anyways, obviously this does look like a macro-based play, okay? Now I've already seen these games, but I figured may as well cast the matches right here on YouTube as well, because I know that a lot of you are gonna get a kick out of this one, so I can already tell you this is a fun set of games. But anyways, even though this looks like an economically focused build order, okay, and that's because it is, it eventually allows you to make more stuff, and therefore you can be more aggressive, right? So this is one of those build orders that I don't recommend you play on the ladder. But if you're ByuN and you're facing off against Serral in a best-of-5 series, it certainly is a build order that I really, really like. Now, if I'm not mistaken, if I recall correctly, yeah, ByuN actually does a cool little move here where he goes command center first on the low ground, but then he goes double barracks on the back of it. So normally this is not quite what we see. In the meantime, by the way, even though ByuN is known as a very aggressive Terran player, Serral is known as a very defensive Zerg. So this is an interesting clash of playstyles, because ByuN usually really, reliant on his multitasking, trying to attack opponents in multiple areas at once. Serral is very much so the kind of guy who, in a macro game at the very least, he does of course mix in aggression as well from time to time, but usually his strategy is to absorb every blow and then to eventually come out swinging. What's difficult about build orders like the one that ByuN is playing here is that Zerg has to react in a certain way against, for example, a 2-1-1. So, ByuN right here, opening up with one tech lab, and then one reactor, and now it's a factory on the back of it. So, normally, whenever we see a 2-1-1 in the Terran versus Zerg matchup, Terrans will go for a barracks first, and then a command center on the low ground, they'll go for a Reaper, and then eventually they'll transition towards that Marine drops, alright? So, the 2-1-1, in case you're unfamiliar, it's usually a 16 Marine drop with Stimpack and then 2 Medevacs. Usually it hits right around 5 minutes and 10 or so seconds, depending on the size of the map. With a build order like this, however, ByuN has already cut quite a few corners. So really, these two Marines, they're the very first units that he gets out on the map. So he basically built an entire command center. He could have been under a lot of pressure there the entire time. He would have probably lost the game, honestly. But anyways, he decided to cut a corner, and it allows him to make an awful lot of units. And this sort of attack is gonna hit like an absolute truck if Zerg is not reading it correctly. So that's exactly what Serral's trying to get done. So Serral just now with that little scout actually got the perfect information that he needs. But how exactly do you judge this right now as a Zerg? It all comes down to the point at which Serral feels like he needs to start making army. Normally, against the conventional version of this build order, he actually just sniped an SCV. Alright, just had to touch it. Normally against the conventional build order that the Terran player is going for, so the standard 2-1-1, Zergs will make... they'll start making Zerglings at about 4.5 minutes into the game until they have about 30. So they'll drone up until about 4.5 minutes, until about 50 drones or so. And then they will start making army units as well. However, as soon as Terran players start mixing up their build orders, right, you have to keep guessing as to when exactly you want to stop making drones and when you need to start making army here instead. And like I said though, Serral, very good when it comes to, well, everything StarCraft. I mean, I could fanboy over Serral here for quite a while. Now, I like this little move out here from ByuN. This isn't really him being ready yet to deal damage. Mostly just trying to threaten the opponent because he knows that Zerg players are gonna cut it very close when it comes to that link production. So now he's trying to see if he can maybe force out a couple of Zerglings out of the opponent already. Looks to me like it's successful as Serral starts adding on a couple more here into the mix. The downside of a build order like this, and Terran players watching this will know, since you don't really get any Hellions out on the battlefield, you can't really contest the creep spread. And creep here is very, very dangerous. Okay, so by the way, it's 48 drones apparently. Now we're starting, well, a couple drones, couple Zerglings as well, but Serral is indeed adding on the units right here. ByuN comes across the map, 19 Marines, so a couple more than we normally see. And he's gonna try and see if he can move up his ramp. Now this is honestly pretty conservative, especially for ByuN's sake. Oof. He sees a swarm of queens waiting on the high ground and decides to wisely back off, because those medevacts, they would be in a lot of trouble. Overlord apparently realizes that it needs to fly away, but that's not gonna happen. Lair in the meantime finished up. Serral decided to go for the Baneling speed here pretty quickly. One link patrolling here as well, mostly just to see if there's a medevac drop coming from that area as well, from that angle. We do have a third command center done on the back of this as well, so obviously since this greedy start, ByuN doesn't really need to deal a lot of damage, but it would certainly be nice. So he decides to move around right now. Serral does see this coming in inside of the main base. Still needs to pivot his units from the third all the way over here. Yeah. And obviously he's known as Micro Jackson, right? ByuN is very good when it comes to controlling his units. Bane speed not done yet. Great pickup right there by the Terran player. Getting a pretty good value right there, but of course nothing all too crazy. Orbital command is finished up on that third CC. So we're going to be flying that one down towards the low ground as now ByuN is setting himself up for that mid-game transition. So honestly, this early game, mostly testing the waters. Greedy opener here by the Terran player for sure, but Serral managed to hold that just fine. Okay. The medevac drop, by the way, continues. Pushing the Marines in between both of those extractors here just to try and be obnoxious, alright? Once again, forcing Zerglings to engage. Actually pretty expensive. All of those traits are, of course, pretty good for the Terran, because you're sniping quite a bit, but big picture here, and that's the real scary part, right? Serral has now finished up his 4th hatchery. Ooh, medevac goes down. That honestly... don't lose another one. Okay, he loses the 2nd medevac too. That honestly justifies this opener entirely right here for Serral. He's now going to be able to drone straight towards 4-base saturation. I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to be seeing this drone button held down here for a while until the man hits about 80 workers. He's going to go into the Hydralisk den as well. ByuN, by the way, picks up. Gets him out of there. No, actually, I say that. He gets him out of there, but he flies forward into the Zerg base. But yeah, now Baneling speed is done. And as soon as Baneling speed finishes up, these games become a whole lot more difficult for the Terran player to play. Look at the creep spread, by the way. So we're barely, we're not even 8 minutes into this game yet, but I mean, Serral not even perfect right there on its spreading of the creep, but he's already pushed the creep very far forward. And especially fighting those roly-polies on creep is incredibly difficult, since obviously we didn't have a Hellion opener here. Terran's been able to do very little to actually push back that creep spread. So yeah, every single time he makes a move, the queens right here that were forced out earlier on because Serral realized he needed more queens, they're now going to push that advantage for the Zerg player even more. Okay. Normally, Terran players will play this relatively passively until the 2-2 upgrades are done. Widowmine over here tries to burrow, does not get it done in time. Normally, we'll see an all-out assault as soon as the 2-2 research finishes here for the Terran player. So that's still about a minute or so away from now. But this is, of course, ByuN we're talking about, so he'll be more than happy to start maneuvering around the map regardless of what's happening as far as the upgrades go. The problem is, though, this is looking very nice right now for Serral, right? He doesn't have an overwhelming advantage, don't get me wrong, but everything here in the first, well, part of this game, it's been going very cleanly. He's made just enough units to push back all of those Terran armies. He's got a good economy, he's got very nice upgrades. Okay. Been microing well as well. I don't think the man right here is disappointed with the way that he's playing here so far, and I mean, this is something obviously that Serral does better than basically anybody else. His Terran versus Zerg, or I guess from his perspective, his Zerg versus Terran, it's best in class. Nobody really plays Zerg versus Terran as well as he does, so I think it's safe to assume Serral is the very best versus Terran player on the planet. And he's showing us in this game, it's not anything fancy. You don't have to do anything special. Look at that. Okay, I'm gonna back off. I'm gonna back off because I feel like some people missed it. So while everything's going on, there was a perfect Widowmine split there. Now, I've tried this in my own games. Look at this little move, okay? So he sees the little line, clicks the one... You see that? That is so sexy. Anyways, there's more Widow Mines on the back of it. Great splits against those as well. It's not really... Yeah, what Serral's doing, he's not really doing anything magical, right? He's not doing anything that in isolation nobody else would be able to execute. But he does it consistently and basically for the entirety of the match. And I think that's probably, yeah, where it looks pretty much inhuman. The guy's insanely good whenever he's on point. Which is, you know, most of the time. Anyways, now we've got the Hive transition coming up. +2/+2 finishing up here as well for the Zerg. Well, +2 melee a little bit later behind. 4th command center with an orbital command on it right here for ByuN. Okay, so that is pretty greedy. That certainly indicates that ByuN wants to continuously pressure here, because that base is not going to be easy to defend. Obviously, as long as you're on your opponent's side of the map and they have to commit their units defensively, usually not a problem, but it can definitely, well, be an issue if the Zerg manages to clean up this force. Good hits right there, though, by the Terran player, using those Marauders here in the front to soak up as much damage as possible. Zerglings right now, together with Banelings, going around the site. ByuN does have a Widow Mine over here that just fired. It's only got a single kill, but at the very least he now knows that there are Zerg units underway. Banelings were added into the mix as well, though, and that makes this all the while more difficult. In the meantime, there's a big drop inside of the main base of the Zerg. Loads of SCVs have gone down right now. 4th hatchery here, though, for the Zerg player, also in a lot of trouble. Looks like the drop in the main base gets cleaned up. 4th base still under pressure. Serral now reinforcing this to the best of his abilities, but he's actually slipped up here. Look at the amount of money that he's got in the bank. He's got way more resources in the bank than you're supposed to have. Mainly because of the fact that he's been, well, forced to push those queens to the front here the entire time. Couple of Banelings here. Once more, though. Trying to morph in some Banelings on the right side of the map. They're ready to roll into the base that doesn't have a planetary fortress hat. Okay, this once more gets cleaned up. I would have loved to see a Ultralisk cavern here. Serral wants to kill SCVs, but he already killed them all. That's a proper First World Zerg problem right there. He wanted to kill all the workers, and he could have killed more, but he'd already killed them, so now he can't. Bit sad right there for the Zerg. Anyhow, mules are gonna be able to replenish some of the mining that the Terran player has just lost. He really needs some detection over here. Okay, Overseer does come by, and that means now that these Widow Mines... Okay, they will not be able to fight another day. Well, maybe the one right there that survived at the very end. I think Ultras would work out quite nicely here. Do we have a Lurker Den? No, we don't have a Lurker Den either. So that does certainly mean that Serral's feeling the pressure here. He's probably looking at this game and he's like, okay, my opponent does not seem to be transitioning towards a late game units. And if he's not transitioning towards late game units, I don't really need late game units myself either. Because that means that all of the fights that are gonna happen, they should take place on creep. So just, yeah. Ooh, once again, a good hit right there. That one of mine has been very nice. But that means that, yeah, you can probably defend primarily using Hydraling Bane here instead. I would have liked to see either Lurkers or Ultras. I think that would still be good options, but Serral apparently has decided, no, I'm gonna be spending my resources right here on just more of the same unit here instead, as that is what ByuN is doing right now as well. Sometimes you can be caught when you're trying to transition towards higher tier units, since you've just invested a lot of resources into things that aren't out yet. Sometimes you can be caught in that weird transitional phase, and since ByuN is so aggressive, I think that's probably why Serral is not gonna make that move too quickly here. Okay. Very nice splits right here by the Terran player, but he's not getting the greatest value either. If he can jump on those Banelings before they finish morphing in, that would be fantastic. He realizes right now that the Hydras would deal a bit too much damage. 68 additional Zerglings on the back of it. Looks like a medevac here at the 4th base also ended up going down. And keep in mind, this base, it's still up and running. 5th command center on location. I love the way ByuN plays this game, man. Puts a smile on my face. 4th CC, no planetary fortress, 5th CC on location against Serral, who's been doing a lot of Zergling run-bys here. Now Vipers are out though, and Vipers are really quite nice. So they're a unit that don't really require any additional tech, right? As long as you have a Hive done, which you need for your late game upgrades anyways, you can just add them on. The only requirement is having a Hive. So Parasitic Bomb in particular can be incredibly valued, or can be giving you incredible value. Now, I really do feel like a planetary fortress would have been better, man. Maybe a bunker, right? Maybe a bunker over here to, like, you know, defend this base. I understand that in theory, maybe the orbital command is better, but in execution, I feel like not losing, you know, 30 SCVs is preferable. Ooh, Viper goes down. He tries to throw a blinding cloud on the... Okay, on the floor at least. Means that this one is going to be able to try to escape. Mispositioning right there by Serral. Not bad at all. He did, by the way, go for a Lurker then. And there was also a Ghost Academy on the production tab. So both players here thinking about transitioning towards other units. And that's exactly what's going on right now as Ghosts are coming out here for the Terran player. Honestly, when the Zerg though is stuck on Hydraling Bane, do you really want Ghosts? They're still pretty good, but they're not amazing. You really preferably want them against those late game Zerg units, so maybe going into Lurkers here is not necessarily the best move. Okay, good splits right there by the Zerg once again, trying to minimize the amount of damage here that those Banelings... Or sorry, minimize the amount of damage that the Widow Mines can deal. Obviously, Zerg is trying to maximize the DPS of those Banes. Yeah, whenever you have to resort to sniping a bunch of Overseers, you know that the Ghosts aren't really getting their maximum value. Anyhow, the traits have been amazing for the Terran, but the income advantage has been heavily in favor of the Zerg. So, yeah, look at the resources lost right here and compare the two. It's obvious that the Terran player has been trading more efficiently. The problem is that Zerg has been mining significantly more. And that's always a difficult sum to make. How exactly do you decide whether or not you're ahead? Well, that certainly is a good start. Killing a hatchery, not bad at all. The Baneling count is high, but the Medevacs still survive, and so do the units inside of them. Overseer here at the bottom of the map. Terran's a little bit scared right now of a potential Nidus network. I don't think we have a Nidus network done right here for the Zerg, but it's something that the Terran has to take into account here. And you can see, man, this is just game number 1 in a best-of-5 series. These guys, they're going toe-to-toe. This is proper high-level StarCraft. I think if this honestly would have been a planetary fortress, it would have been significantly better for the Terran. Because the fact that he lost so many workers in this area of the map is unnecessary. It works well if the Zerg doesn't counterattack, but like, you know, the Zerg should be counterattacking. Anyways, there's now the Nidus network going up. We also have the Seismic Spines upgrade, that is the Lurker ranged. And even though we don't have any Lurkers out on the battlefield just yet, we're gonna probably see them here momentarily. And once again, look at this. Imagine a planetary. Poof. Poof. It would have been 5 SCVs that... Oh, 6 SCVs that didn't have to die. Ooh, Ghost over here. Okay, ooh, some of them got picked up, but Medevac's running dangerously low. These bases are, of course, becoming... Okay, misrallied Ghost over here as well. I'm not sure what's happening there. But these bases are getting closer and closer together, right? So, the distance right here of this, like, 6th base of the Zerg compared to the Terran's 3rd, yeah, they're becoming neighbors. Which means that those late-game units sort of become mandatory for the Zerg as well. He's mixing in a couple of Infestors. That's kind of interesting. Fungal Growth, obviously, can be amazing. Good splits here once again by ByuN, though, doing what ByuN does best. Zerglings over here on the right side once more. And it's starting to really become painful right now. Don't attack move with your SCVs, man. These are, well upgraded links. And with Adrenal Glands, they don't mess around. Okay, Snipes once again going down, left, right, and center. Parasitic Bomb, but beautiful splits right there by ByuN. He was so fast on that, but sadly right there for him, some of the Ghosts do get blown up. 17 SCVs right here in total, by the way, as apparently... Did I just miss an entire command center dying? When did that When did that command center go down? Apparently this planetary fortress falls here, and I don't think I had it on the camera. I must have been looking at those Zerglings and complaining about planetary fortresses. Whereas the planetary fortress that was out, yeah, that one got destroyed. Anyways, one-man production team Loko coming in clutch once again. Luckily, through the power of video editing, I can make this look at least somewhat professional. Terran's gonna continue onwards with the aggression right here up north. Now there's a couple of Infestors in the mix though, and I don't think ByuN has seen them. It's very, very dangerous, of course, because one Fungal Growth against these clumped up Terran units can be an absolute disaster. Where'd they go? Okay, they're over here in the back. Fungal Growth moving forward, and that is an absolute... Yeah, that's an absolute disaster right here for the Terran player, and apparently that's immediately the nail in the coffin as well. ByuN is forced to tap out, as Serral is just a little too strong here in game number 1. Next up, we find ourselves on Babylon. Now, according to Aligalek, here's the current top 10 when it comes to the pro gamers in StarCraft 2. So we have Maru in first place, then we have Serral, Hero, ByuN, Raynor, MaxSpecs, Dark, Solar. Then we have Olivera in 9th place. So he's obviously the new StarCraft 2 World Champion. And then Clem is currently the number 10. Now, of course, you always have to take these stats with a grain of salt, but I do think that overall they are pretty dang accurate. So the green arrows, by the way, are the most recent developments. In case you're wondering, there's also a couple of red arrows right there, apparently, for example, for Dark. Either way, if you look at the rating that Aligalek has assigned to Serral's Zerg versus Zerg, especially if you compare it to a Zerg versus Terran and a Zerg versus Protoss, you can really tell that that is the one matchup that's holding him back. If you compare that to, for example, ByuN's ratings, the man doesn't really seem to have any real weakness. I mean, calling Serral's Zerg versus Zerg a weakness, it's 31-25. It's still very respectable. And even though I do think he's favored in most of the Zerg versus Zergs that he plays, it's just, yeah, not that domination that we have seen out of Serral in the Zerg versus Terran, and then also the Zerg versus Protoss matchup for a while. ByuN, though, 33-77 against Zerg is a very respectable rating as well, but apparently not quite as high as Maru's, who's sitting at, is that the highest score on this entire list? 36-48? Yeah, I think it is. My god. Maru's Terran versus Zerg is actually insane. Anyhow, game number 2, we find ourselves on Babylon, and once again, it's a command center first. Are you gonna let this one slide, Serral? So he's gonna get across the map here soon with an Overlord. He will see that it's once again gonna be a command center first. No second barracks this time around right here for the Terran player. This is a very greedy style to play though, ByuN. He even goes for a Marine once again. So the problem when you go for a Marine is that you just don't know anything about the other side of the map. Serral could do anything he likes, and you will not scout any aggression. You will just not know. He could go for a one-base lair. He could go one-base Brute Lords, okay? Now, I don't think he's gonna go one-base Brute Lords, because that would be a little bit funky. But he could, hypothetically speaking. If you don't go for an SCV scout, and you just go for a single Marine, you're playing a very, very greedy game. Third hatchery just started up right here for Serral as well. And now the Zerglings are ready to run across the map. Little bird. The Urubu. Urubu? I think that's what it's called. Anyhow, they will see the Marine right here as well. I think you guys could have fought it. Okay. SCV pulled away from their mineral line too. He scouts the front here. He sees the Hellion follow-up. Starport comes up on the back of this. Serral has not started up link speed yet. So, okay, yeah. There's properly 2 options. Either he's late, or he's saving the gas for something else. Okay. Roach Warren comes up. There's no way that ByuN is ever going to scout this Roach Warren. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, Loko, what about a scan? Technically speaking, ByuN could throw a scan right there into the Zerg's natural, but every single scan is precious, and especially at this point in the game, you honestly can't afford a scan. So even though theoretically speaking it's something that the Terran player could scout, it's very difficult to actually pull that off. These Hellions, of course, need to be pushed back. They can scout a couple things. They can scout the lack of wings on those Zerglings, but they can also scout the structures itself. Roach Warren finishes right now. 3 roaches coming up. I feel like we're waiting for larva. There you go, yeah. 7 roaches indeed are coming up. The 7 roach opener, 8 roach opener, 9 roach opener. When are we gonna stop? In the meantime, by the way, on the other side of the map, ByuN has already chosen his weapon of attack in this particular game as well, as he is opening up with concussive shelled Marauders. This can get kind of awkward. Of course, Marauders are amazing when it comes to fighting roaches, but there's gonna be a lot of roaches. And sometimes it's just a numbers game, right? So the Hellions will see the roaches right now. The only reason to see this many roaches right here if... Well, that's the only reason why he would see them is if the Zerg wants to use them aggressively, so he now realizes what he's playing against. Concussive Shells has finished up. Do we go for a bunker? No, I don't think we really need it. Droning, by the way, is on the back of this here as well for Serral. Serral now knows he's been spotted. He must have noticed as well that there's some sort of aggression coming up. Okay, well, this is the first time he properly sees that it's a Marauder opener. Look at the splash damage. Look at that concave. Fantastic defense right here by ByuN. Absolutely shutting down this roach aggression. Marauders are, of course, good against roaches, right? Now the concussive shells, of course, are finished too, so these roaches, they're not gonna go anywhere. Beautiful defense right there by ByuN, who ends up losing 4 Hellions, but that is certainly a very respectable amount of stuff. Serral at this point finding himself in a bit of a predicament because he doesn't have link speed, right? So he still did not go link speed. You can't really counter Hellions with slow Zerglings, so he's forced to make more roaches. Roaches and queens are still pretty dang good. He's been droning here for a while, so worker-wise he's actually fine. 3rd CC on the back of this also coming up for the Terran player, but it's not done yet. Yeah, I think he's got enough roaches here to push this back once again. Okay. Liberator here, coming up. Additional barracks also building right now for Terran. So he's gonna start piling on the pressure. A lot of the Terrans over the last couple of months have been very keen to play that battle mech style, and I do feel like it suits ByuN's way of playing the game, but ByuN very much so still that bio Terran that we've seen him focus on for the last couple of years. It'd be kind of cool to see him, well, mix it up a little. Hello? Okay. He does get on out of there. Great defense here once again by Serral, who's now gonna go for the lair together with the 2 evolution chambers. Now this leads to the classic Zerg push. This leads towards the +1/+1 of roach speed attack, if that is what Serral wants to go for. It's of course an amazing push. It's the push we've seen ever since the game first released back in like 2010. So what you do is you start up +1 missile, +1 carapace. There you go. And then you go for the Glial Reconstitution, the roach speed upgrade as soon as the lair finishes up. All of those upgrades should finish right around the time. Yep, right around the same time that is. And you can go for a big push if you want to. That does mean that Serral needs to make units here for a while. You can also just play a macro here from, you know, this particular position. Guys like ByuN are usually very good at picking up on this sort of attack. Liberator getting nothing done. So if he realizes that that's what's happening, he can really start dropping all over the place. And if you can keep those roaches at home, usually you can build up for a while. Now, the 4th hatchery finishes and Serral immediately starts the gas geysers. This is not something that you normally do. Normally you saturate minerals first. So we're gonna have to keep an eye out on exactly what he's planning to use that, there's metabolic boost by the way. Oh, what he's gonna use that gas on. Apparently we're going straight towards a hive. Hydra then also on the back of this. So even though this could lead towards that roach speed attack, and maybe he's gonna try and test the waters a little bit at that point. But yeah, I think the man is just doing a tech rush here. Maybe he was a little bit late when it came to his Zergling speed, but he's catching up in the technological department here as the game progresses. Anyhow, in the meantime on the other side, we do have ByuN playing a fairly standard game. Yeah, he definitely needs to go and start up +2/+2. He obviously couldn't until the armory was done. So we see a couple of small slip-ups right here from ByuN. And even though that early game defense was excellent, and this aggression is also doing well, he definitely does not want to, slow himself down any more than he absolutely needs to. Right now, for example, he hasn't started up the +2 armor yet for the bio units. That is something that can bite you in the butt if you're not careful. Okay, now it starts up. Okay, it's very easy to accidentally forget when these 2 upgrades are not researching at the exact same time. But yeah, ByuN does not forget, as he shouldn't, but it's a mistake that's easily made. Hive is, by the way, gonna finish up. This is, of course, something that ByuN just saw as well. The Lurker then has started. The plan, I think, is for the Terran player to try and win this game before Lurkers are out. So Lurker Viper is the name of the game. ByuN really wants to win the game before that is done, but it's going to be kind of difficult because these roaches are still going to be able to do a lot of damage. Siege tank over here, though, in a nice position on the high ground, ready to shell away at these roaches, ravagers, and zerglings. The problem is if you don't have ghosts against vipers and lurkers, you're in a lot of trouble. So this attack that ByuN is going for, it's on a timer. And that's why having those upgrades delayed, because you can't really fight this before 2-2 is done either, it all becomes very messy. So now there are 6 lurkers coming up. And those lurkers are going to be amazing when it comes to defending these locations, especially when the seismic spines finishes up. That's the additional range for those lurkers. It is going to be more and more difficult here for the Terran player to get this push done. ByuN right now realizes the clock is ticking as well. He's got the 4th CC. 4th CC is critical here if he wants to transition towards ghosts eventually. But so far, I'm not seeing any of those transitions on the production tab yet. Keep in mind that these Vipers, they are nerfed, but abductions, yeah, still certainly possible. Couple of roaches here pushing on the left side of the map. This is Serral expecting a 4th CC to come up here very shortly, but... Okay, 4th CC instead building here all the way up north. It is once more going to be an orbital command. This one feels a lot more desperate to me. Big drop inside of the main base. The desperate moves here continue, but this one may actually be a lot more successful. Zerg has obviously put all of their defenses here up north. Lurkers are going to be left behind. Okay, Adrenal Glands gets denied and the spawning pool gets killed. That's huge. In the meantime, though, the Lurkers, ooh, they are needed here because Terran was also stimming forward. Apparently, we're splitting up the Lurkers a little bit. Roach is here together with a couple of other units trying to make the best of this situation. Transfusion on the Hydralisk to try and keep it alive as well. Okay, maybe this medevac drop can continue dealing some damage here. I don't know if Serral realized that he lost the spawning pool. Okay, well, if he ever tries to make a queen, or a spine, or a spore, or a zergling, I guess he'll figure it out. He probably did figure it out, but not the priority right now. So those roaches from earlier, by the way, still being obnoxious over here. Apparently they invited themselves into the Terran's natural. Ghosts are coming up right now, though. I actually quite like the fact that ByuN decided to go for the base up here. I think if you are gonna go for such a forward 4th command center, orbital command is probably your best bet, because those lurkers can, well, bury right next to it, or burrow right next to it whenever they like. Siege tank, once again, abducted. And even though Serral didn't have the best start in this game, he's really making the best of it right now, rushing straight towards those lurkers. Like, these units, considering the early game, hit the battlefield incredibly early on. I think in most games, you probably don't see the first lurker until right about right now. Matter of fact, drop here, very ambitious, flying over the Zerg army, so this definitely has been spotted. He's gonna try and slow push without a lot of ghosts. What in the world are you gonna do? Okay, matter of fact, drop here, chased around, followed around. Double spawning pool, by the way, coming up right now for Serral. Built within a couple seconds of one another. Now the base has been cut off, though. Yeah. So the timing attack that Terran could go for, it failed. Couple of reasons as to why. Those upgrades were late, the positioning was not great. And Zerg obviously had the lurkers out very, very early. I don't think ByuN expected those units to be that properly upgraded and that early on in this particular game. Okay, Zerg setting up a small little sandwich. He honestly doesn't need to be too aggressive, but, well, if you kill an orbital command, that's pretty dang good. He now decides to move around, knocking down his own rocks. Okay, a couple of ghosts get abducted there as well. My god, a lot of damage being done. The Vipers, though, do have to pay the price, but already 30 SCVs have gone down. Serral can replenish this army quite easily, going for 40 additional Zerglings right now. Roaches here, on top of ghosts. Not normally a bad fight for the ghosts, but at this point, there's just not enough units available, and Serral wins game number 2. And that takes us to Ancient Cistern. This time around, we've got double barracks going up at the front, and because of the fact that we saw double command center now on the low ground first, Serral decides to go for the spawning pool. So this is a little bit of a mind game. This is a pool first with a very quick gas geyser, and of course a delayed expansion right now for the Zerg. This would have worked amazingly well in the previous 2 games, but not so well in this one. So this is the coin flip that ByuN has been hoping for. Something he's gonna need as well. Then again, though, it's not like those early game Zerglings with speed are gonna be particularly bad when it comes to defending against those Reapers. And honestly, actually, I may be getting this all wrong. Maybe this is Serral assuming that this will be the build order from the opponent, and he decides, you know what I really need against this build, because I know that ByuN is very fond of it, especially on this map, what I really need with a build like this is that Zergling speed. Now, he just deliberately pulled 1 drone out of gas, and he's leaving 2 in there. There's a couple of builds where this can be helpful. Like, for example, a Baneling Bust. It can be helpful when you're going for a Roach push on the back of it. But usually none of the options involve macro. The only reason why I would leave drones in gas here is if you're planning something sneaky. So we'll see what Serral decides to go for here as this game progresses. Right now, ByuN realizes as well that this was not a hatchery first. By the way, it's a triple Rex. Triple Rex is always a little bit scary, but certainly not something that is incredibly uncommon. The main problem here for Zergs is that they usually can't quite figure out if it's a double Rex or a triple Rex. You do have to... Yeah, you can scout the two at the front, but you do have to react differently to each of those build orders. Anyways, now Serral has pulled the drones out of gas. Okay. He's probably been counting the Reapers that he's seen so far. He's obviously also got Overlord, so he's probably realized, okay, this is actually a pretty aggressive version of this build. Whatever I had in mind, I need to make sure I put all of my eggs into... Well, literally, his eggs right over here at the hatchery. I need to make sure that all of those eggs are turning into units that can actually be helpful right now. Tech, not super important. He goes out onto the map, gets a wraparound on a couple of those Reapers, and this is a disaster right here for ByuN. Losing basically everything that he started off in this game with. That is bad. Losing 5 Reapers for 5 Zerglings. That's exactly what Zerg wants right now. And again, now Zerg can do whatever they please. In this particular spawn location as well, these add-ons are on the wrong side. So add-ons always spawn to the right of those Terran structures. If ByuN would have spawned on the other side of the map and those barracks were part of the wall over here, then obviously the tech lab or the double reactor over here, it would be safe. Now luckily for him, he does have a tech lab in the main base that can't be denied. But I've seen a lot of games where those tech labs just get denied over and over and over again. And then, well, Terran never finishes up Stimpack. And without that pivot, it's basically impossible for the Terran player to get anything done. Third hatchery right now has come up. ByuN at this point, though, wondering, right? Is Zerg gonna go for aggression on the back of this? It's Serral who's playing. Is Serral really gonna go for a Baneling bust? Not likely. Probably not. But he certainly could. That's where this game becomes very difficult to play. You're always guessing. Okay, yeah. Maybe moving out here with the Reapers is the right call. Serral, by the way, not really doing anything too feisty. Going for a single Evo chamber here. That's kind of interesting. Not sure why we have a single Evo. With one Evo chamber, usually you will go for the Carapace upgrade because it benefits more units. But usually this is what you do when you're a little uncertain. Serral at this point may be wondering, okay, there could be a massive bio push coming soon as that Stimpack upgrade finishes up. So he's probably right there, yeah. So he goes Carapace. Stimpack and +1 infantry weapons, though, are coming up. +1 infantry weapons a little late. Double medevac now also researching. There's the Baneling Nest. No lair yet, though. So this is all a little bit... I don't want to be doubting Serral here, because he seems to really know what he's doing in this particular matchup, but... Without a lair, the Baneling Nest feels a little funny. Like slow Banelings against ByuN? No. I mean, it could, but you really do need to make sure you have a decent amount of speed on your units as well if you want to face off against ByuN. Anyways, medevacs are gonna come out, so now we're transitioned into a standard marine opener, sort of like the one that we saw in the previous game, but obviously in a very different way to get there. Serral now starts making a large amount of units. Keep in mind you're looking for at least 30 Zerglings, preferably some more. This is a lot of Marines, though. Then again, some of those Marines are at home. There should be more than enough here for the Zerg player to push this back. It's important right now for ByuN to find a way to come back into this game. Getting all of those Reapers caught a couple of minutes ago really is making his progression in this game significantly slower. They were supposed to deal damage on the other side of the map and they didn't. Now you're playing this game from behind, so what exactly are your options to come back? Option 1, I would say, is skipping the third command center and just using that amount of resources to go for additional production instead, effectively going for a 2-base all-in. Problem is, though, with a 2-base all-in, you really do have to hit before the Baneling speed upgrade is done, and that one just started here for Serral, so about a minute and a little bit, about the 8-minute mark or so into this game. I would imagine that upgrade is finished, and that's going to make the base defense significantly easier for Serral. Maybe not the best choice. Option B, play the macro game like you normally would, and cross your fingers and hope that Serral messes up. Well, this is very painful. Reinforcing Terran units do come from the high ground. Okay, that actually justifies this just a bit. That's a lot of Zerglings going down right there for only 10 Marines, actually. So maybe that was actually the best case scenario right there for ByuN. But those are the sorts of things that he's probably hoping for right now. He's going for Liberators and for Siege Tanks. Okay. So what Serral should do is just leave this position alone. He must realize at this point that it's a 2-base all-in. He indeed evacuates the 3rd base entirely. He's already got the 4th base finished up. Transfers the drones on over in that direction. ByuN realizes that this is exactly the move that Serral should be making here, as he decides to move around. Now, I forgot about that move. So I'd already seen these games, right? But I forgot about the move that Serral gave up that 3rd base. But that was such a high-level decision. It's so obvious when you're watching the game, right? Because ByuN, he's basically he's saying, like, come to me, man. Like, come towards my siege tank line of fire. I'm on the low ground. I want you to fight me right now. Serral instead, ooh, catches a siege tank over here on the other side of the map. Really nicely done. Yeah, whenever you have to siege up Liberators against Lynx, that's when you know you're in a bad spot. Now Terran has been out on the map for such a long time as well that the Zerg has been reinforcing this since forever. That now means that Serral's gonna try and collapse on top of this army. Queen's coming in from the side as well. That is a siege tank going down. They are firing on the Banelings to the best of their abilities, but, well, the 2nd tank also falls. Greedy move right there from Serral for sure. But he's getting more income right here than the opponent. Keep in mind, there's no 3rd CC here ever. By the way, apparently the only way for some of those Terran units to leave the Terran's natural is by lifting off the barracks. Another problem with this spawn location here, because the supply depot does not allow you enough space. Now the 3rd command center comes up at the 9-minute mark. That is rough. Serral's already got a 2nd 4th base coming up. And then also a 5th. Planting his macro hatcheries on location, because that's the confidence we're talking about here. Going after some of the add-ons as well. Now realizes though, okay, the Terran army is no longer here. I probably should be using my units defensively instead. Hydra then coming up. ByuN does still have a very respectable army though. 85 army supply versus 88. The fight is of course going to take place on creep, but it is important for Serral here that he does not mess this up. Liberator slowly pushing forward. Serral trying to set up a massive surround right now. Trying to come in from as many angles as possible. The question is, when exactly is he gonna pull the trigger to collapse on top of this Terran army? Well, he wants to buy time. Yeah, he wants to buy as much time as possible, because the more time goes by, the better this is gonna be right now. But this is apparently the moment where Serral decides to pull the trigger and engage on top of this entire Terran army. There's a little bit of creep right over here as well from this newly made hatchery, and that's actually helping him out quite a bit. Not a lot of anti-air available here for the Zerg players, so these Liberators, they are dealing a lot of damage. Bio army right now dropping itself down on top of Banelings because that is once more cost efficient. Hydra then is, yeah, a 2nd one is starting up. It is very critical here to try and get rid of those Libs, because the Libs are dealing a ton of damage. ByuN has, of course, finished up the 3rd CC in the meantime as well. He needs to deal some sort of damage. It's not like Zerg's economy here is massive either, though. Maybe I've been overselling it a little bit, because he's only at 55 drones. He hasn't lost any. He's just decided to not really make any more than that. There is a Zergling here on the 3rd base location, as well as an Overlord. Or no, that's not an Overlord. That's another Zergling right there on the left side of the map, too. So Serral still knows that this is a 2-base all-in. The main base is gonna start running low here. Yeah, 14 out of 6 SCVs in the main minerals, and that is pretty bad. Okay, siege tank here together with a bunch of Marines. They get caught as the reinforcements were supposed to go towards the other side of the map. That hatchery falls, but again, Serral does not need that hatchery. Things are starting to look desperate for ByuN, but they have been desperate for a long time, and his supply count is still massive. He catches a huge chunk of the Terran army, however, off creep. That is not the location where ByuN anticipated that fight to happen. Now there's also Hydras on the ground though, and Hydras are significantly better against those Liberators than the Queens were. The creep has been pushed forward quite nicely here as well through the center of the map. Okay, Serral trying to engage on top of these siege tanks, and he actually gets there, well, basically at the same time as they manage to fully siege up. Now the Banelings are also forcing their way into the natural expansion. And just like that, it's Serral who wins over ByuN 3-0.